Welcome to Whispers of Crime. Today we're stepping inside a place that promised absolute safety, the De Zalze Winelands Estate in Stellenbosch, South Africa.
A place built to keep the horrors out, designed to be impenetrable.
But on January 27, 2015, that fortress, well, it became the scene of something truly horrific, a family annihilation.
So brutal, so utterly baffling, it sent shockwaves through a nation already quite accustomed to violence.
It's a chilling paradox, isn't it?
Absolutely. You have this wealthy, well-respected family, the Van Bredas.
Yeah.
Martin, the father, Teresa, the mother, Rudy, the oldest son, all attacked viciously with an axe.
Well, not just attacked, murdered.
Murdered. The daughter, Marley, she survived, but barely. Catastrophic injuries.
And then there's the other survivor, the middle son, Henri, found almost 3 hours later.
Right. And he had only minor injuries, superficial wounds. His story. He claimed he fought off some kind of phantom attacker, someone who was laughing.
It's stuff of nightmares. But when the police arrived, the initial picture, potential house robbery, it started to crumble almost immediately.
It did. Because of three core mysteries, three things that just didn't make any sense.
Okay, let's lay them out. First, the 3 a.m. emergency call that took 22 minutes to make.
Think about that. The violence supposedly happens around, 4:24 a.m.?
Yeah, just before 4:30 a.m.
But Henri, the survivor, he doesn't call for help until 7:12 a.m., nearly 3 hours later.
3 hours. In a house filled with, carnage. That silence is just deafening, isn't it? It screams suspicion.
It really does. Then the second point.
A son's superficial wounds among a bloodbath of brutality.
Exactly. How does this young man supposedly fight off an axe murderer, wrestle the weapon away, and walk away with just neat little cuts, almost cosmetic?
It beggars belief when you consider the sheer violence inflicted on everyone else.
It absolutely does. And the third element.
The phantom intruder who left no trace in a maximum security estate.
De Zalze wasn't just a nice neighborhood. It was a fortress. High-tech security everywhere.
Right.
Yet no alarms went off, no signs of forced entry, no unidentified DNA found anywhere, nothing.
So this intruder, if they even existed, they vanished without a trace, like a ghost.
Pretty much. It wasn't just a failure of security that these points suggested. It suggested the whole story Henri was telling. It was fundamentally flawed. The facts just didn't line up.
Okay, this is deeply unsettling stuff. Before we dig deeper into the evidence and the timeline, just a quick reminder. If you're finding this case as compelling and chilling as we do, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime.
And you can also follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, basically all the major podcast platforms.
Hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube, and definitely drop your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you think about this one.
Oh, and don't miss our previous deep dive. We covered the Oscar Pistorius case, another really disturbing South African story that also, interestingly, involved claims of phantom intruders.
Definitely check that out.
Yeah.
But now, back to the horror at De Zalze. Let's start with the family itself. Who were the Van Bredas? What was their life like before this?
Well, on the surface, they seemed like the picture of success. Martin and Teresa, they married back in 1990. Very well-educated people, described as intelligent, well-mannered.
Oh, they had 3 kids.
3 kids, yes. Rudy, the eldest, born 92, then Henri, born 94, and Marley, the youngest, born in 98.
And they'd lived abroad for a significant time, right? Australia.
That's right. They spent several years in Perth. It actually gave the children dual citizenship, access to really good schools over there. They seem like a very globally mobile, affluent family.
So why come back to South Africa? Especially given the concerns about crime that seem so prevalent there.
Well, Martin was the driving force there. He was a very successful, very focused businessman. They returned permanently in January 2014, about a year before the murders happened.
And it was for his business.
Specifically, yes.
Right.
He launched a new venture called Adugro. That was the main reason for the move back. Rudy, the oldest son, he was actually just visiting from university in Australia at the time. He was due to head back shortly after.
So a family seemingly at the pinnacle of success gathered back together in South Africa.
Pretty much. Their life revolved around, Martin's business success, education for the kids, and Martin himself was seen as this very strong, respected figure.
And their choice of home, De Zalze. That speaks volumes about their priorities, doesn't it? They didn't just choose a nice suburb.
No, absolutely not. They specifically sought out a maximum security estate. Henri himself testified about this. He said the plan was always to live somewhere secure, like in Cape Town, to be, and this was his phrase, inoculated from crime.
Inoculated from crime.
Wow.
And De Zalze was the top tier.
Considered the gold standard, yes. especially in the Stellenbosch area.
So what does maximum security actually mean in that context? What were we talking about physically?
We're talking serious measures. The entire estate perimeter, that's about 7.5 kilometers, was enclosed by electric fencing. Fully monitored, alarms linked to it.
Okay.
Then you had comprehensive CCTV coverage across the estate, 24/7 security patrols, both guards and dog units. And getting in, very strict. 3 access-controlled gates, rigorous visitor registration. One of the detectives, Captain Stain, he'd been on the force 17 years. He testified he'd never, ever recorded a murder or even a robbery inside the Zelle before this.
That's incredible. So technically, it should have been almost impossible for an outsider to get in, commit this, and get out unseen.
Technically, yes. But there was a weak link.
Which was?
Complacency. The family themselves. The security was so good, the residents felt so safe.
That they maybe let their own guard down.
Exactly. Neighbors said they felt incredibly secure. The Van Bredas, it seems, sometimes left their back door unlocked. They slept with windows open sometimes, even without burglar bars fitted. Keys were left in internal doors.
So they had this high-tech shield around them, but inside their own home, they felt comfortable enough to bypass basic precautions.
It seems that way. It's a tragic irony, really. Trusting the fortress so much they forgot to lock their own doors.
And it wasn't just the physical security that might have had cracks. There were signs the perfect family image wasn't entirely accurate, especially that night.
Yes, this is crucial. A neighbor, Mrs. Optehoff, gave testimony. She heard loud voices, male voices, coming from the Van Breda house late that night.
When exact?
Sometime between 10:00 p.m. and about 10 past midnight. And she described the tone as aggressive. It sounded like a serious argument.
An aggressive argument late at night.
Yeah.
That doesn't exactly fit the picture the defense later tried to paint, does it?
Not at all. The defense claimed the family had dinner, then peacefully watched a movie together, Star Trek II, I think it was. This timeline seemed, well, conveniently introduced, perhaps, to explain away those raised voices the neighbor heard. It suggests things weren't so calm inside 12 Goska Street that night.
Okay, so we have this backdrop. Wealth, extreme security, but also unlocked doors and definite signs of internal conflict just hours before the attack. Let's get into the timeline of the horror itself. Based initially on Henri's account, when did he say the attack began?
According to Henri's statement, it started shortly before 4:24 a.m. on the morning of the 27th. He claimed he was in the bathroom, the ensuite attached to the bedroom he shared with Rudy.
And you heard noises.
Yes, he said he heard sounds, initially thought it might just be an argument or something, so he looked out.
He peeked through a crack in the door, I believe.
That's what he said. And he claimed he saw this figure, dressed in dark clothes, wearing a balaclava, gloves, attacking his brother Rudy with an axe.
Just devastating. And then the father, Martin.
Martin apparently came rushing in to help Rudy and was also struck down by the attacker.
But the detail that always stood out, the truly bizarre part of his description.
The laughing.
Yes, he claimed the attacker was laughing, or giggling,
Oh.
while brutally attacking Rudy and Martin.
He even testified that the attacker seemed to be, and this is chilling, having fun murdering people.
I mean, that's pure horror movie stuff.
Right.
But it sounds completely wrong for a typical burglar, right?
Yeah.
Someone breaking in for valuables wouldn't usually behave like that.
Absolutely not. Opportunistic burglars want to get in, get valuables, and get out fast. They avoid confrontation if possible. This description, this gratuitous, almost gleeful violence, it points to something much more personal, much more disturbed.
And the mother, Teresa, and sister, Marley, where were they?
According to Henri, they were drawn to the commotion. They appeared in the passageway just outside the boys' bedroom, and they were attacked there.
With the same axe.
Yes. Both suffered terrible chop and incised wounds. Forensics later showed Teresa had defensive wounds, particularly on her thumb. She fought back.
And Henri's role in all this, according to him, he didn't just watch.
No, he claimed he intervened. He said he wrestled the axe away from the attacker.
Wrestled an axe away from a laughing killer. He made it sound surprisingly easy.
He did describe the attacker as being relatively easy to disarm, which again sounds odd. But then according to Henri, the attacker produced a second weapon.
The knife.
The knife, which crucially wasn't brought by the intruder. It was later identified as a Victorinox carving knife.
From their own kitchen block.
Directly from the Van Breda kitchen knife set. Exhibit 2 in the trial. That's a huge red flag against the intruder theory.
So the attacker conveniently finds not only the family axe, but also a specific knife from the kitchen.
Highly improbable, to say the least.
And Henri claimed he was injured during this part. With the knife.
Yes. He said the attacker stabbed him in the side. He even gave this vivid detail about the knife getting stuck, needing to be pulled out by the attacker.
Okay. And then what? The attacker flees.
Henri claimed he chased the attacker, or possibly attackers. His story shifted on the number downstairs. He said he threw the axe at the fleeing figure but missed, hitting the wall instead. That apparently created the impact mark labeled D by investigators.
He threw the murder weapon.
That's his claim. Then he said he saw his mother and sister lying injured on the landing or stairs, and at that point he supposedly lost consciousness. Passed out right there on the stairs.
Right, passed out. Which brings us smack bang into that massive, inexplicable time gap, because the digital evidence tells a very different story about what happened next.
It absolutely does. If he lost consciousness right after the attack, around 4:24 a.m., how do we explain his phone activity just minutes later?
Exactly. What did the phone records show?
At 04:27 a.m., literally 3 minutes after he supposedly passed out, his phone is used to do an internet search. He's looking for ambulance services.
But he couldn't even spell emergency correctly.
No, he misspelled emergency in South Africa, which might suggest panic or perhaps something else. But the key thing is, he was conscious. He was awake and using his phone.
And it wasn't just the search, was it? He was making calls too.
Yes. Between 4:24 a.m. and 4:32 a.m., that crucial period right after the attacks, he tried calling his ex-girlfriend Bianca 3 times.
His ex-girlfriend, not emergency services, not a state security.
No. His ex-girlfriend who didn't answer, then the internet search. The actual call to emergency services didn't happen until 07:02 a.m.
That's a gap of nearly 2 hours and 40 minutes. What on earth was he doing? Why the delay?
That became the million-dollar question. The prosecution argued it showed someone who wasn't in shock, but was perhaps contemplating, maybe even staging the scene, certainly not acting like a victim desperately needing help. His mind was clearly working, just not towards getting immediate aid for his family.
That delay and then the nature of the emergency call itself. It's arguably one of the most bizarre aspects of the whole case. The operator thought it was a prank call.
She did, initially. Janine Philander, the emergency operator, her testimony was critical. The call itself lasted a long time, about 25 minutes, from 7:12 a.m. to 7:37 a.m.
And Henri's demeanor during this call, what was so off about it?
His calmness. Mrs. Philander described him as quite calm and cooperative. People listening to the recording expected hysteria, panic, maybe anger.
Anything but calm cooperation.
Right. Instead, he sounded measured, almost flat, monotone at times. And crucially, he never sounded frantic. He never asked her, "What can I do? How can I help them?" while his family was supposedly bleeding out upstairs.
That lack of urgency, that detachment, it's chilling.
It really is. It was so unusual that Mrs. Philander actually flagged it to her supervisor immediately. It just wasn't consistent with someone who just witnessed and survived such horror.
And weren't there other strange things about the call, like getting the address right or knowing where the emergency numbers were?
Yes, he kept giving his address, but the operator had trouble pinpointing the exact street within the Dezalze estate, which maybe isn't that odd. But the numbers. He knew there were emergency numbers stuck right there on the kitchen fridge.
Like right next to where he was making the call from.
Exactly. Numbers for 24-hour support, the local hospital. But he told the operator they didn't seem of any assistance. He actually said he thought Googling it would be better.
He dismissed the actual emergency numbers provided for that exact situation. That sounds deliberately obstructive.
It certainly raised eyebrows. It suggests he wasn't trying the most direct route to get help. Also, he only told the operator his sister Marley was still moving, implying she was the only one possibly alive.
But later he claimed he heard sounds from Rudy too.
Yes, later he mentioned hearing gurgling sounds from Rudy, but he couldn't explain why he hadn't mentioned that potential sign of life to the operator during that critical call. It seemed like selective information sharing.
And while all this was supposedly happening, or rather while he was delaying, what did the police find when they finally arrived? Did the scene downstairs match the supposed chaos?
Not really. That's another piece that pointed towards staging. The first responding officers, Captain Stein and Sergeant Clemhens, they noted how clean the ground floor was. Eerily clean, considering the bloody carnage upstairs.
And no signs of a robbery.
Absolutely no valuables were missing. Nothing. They did find some cupboards and drawers open in the study, which might initially suggest a search by an intruder.
Hmm.
But the contents inside those drawers were neat, perfectly arranged. Nothing was tossed out or rummaged through in the way you'd expect from a frantic burglar looking for cash or small valuables. It looked posed, staged.
It all points to time. Time to clean up, time to arrange things, time to think. And that detail about the cigarettes.
Yes, that was telling too. Henri admitted during his testimony that while he was waiting, presumably, between the attack and calling for help, or maybe even during the wait for responders, he went and got his cigarettes.
Which he usually had.
Yes, apparently his parents disapproved of his smoking, so he kept them hidden, often in his shoes. But on this morning, amidst the horror, he retrieved them and smoked them openly at the kitchen counter.
That suggests a level of calm, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Presence of mind, not blind panic. The ability to remember where his hidden cigarettes were, retrieve them, light up.
Exactly. It speaks to a state of mind that had time for routine, even a forbidden one, rather than overwhelming trauma. It suggests he wasn't just waiting helplessly. He was waiting with some degree of control over himself and the situation.
So the defense had a mountain to climb. They had to explain the time gap, the calm demeanor, the lack of intruder evidence, the self-inflicted looking wounds. How did they try to counter all this? Henri's story kept changing, didn't it?
It did. The prosecution really hammered him on what they termed selective memory loss. His narrative definitely evolved over time.
How so? What were the key changes?
Well, his initial statement to the police, which was given just hours after the event when he was still being treated primarily as a victim and witness, that statement differed in key ways from his formal plea explanation submitted much later for the trial.
Okay, what?
One big one was the number of attackers. Initially, he seemed to only mention one intruder. The idea that there might have been a second attacker, and specifically that a second axe might have been involved, particularly in the attack on Marley, that emerged much later.
When did that detail come up?
It really solidified after the initial DNA results came back. The prosecution suggested this change was a deliberate attempt to explain away inconsistencies, like why Marley's blood wasn't found significantly on Henri's clothes if he was present during her attack, as the spatter suggested for the others. A second attacker with a second weapon could theoretically account for that.
So the story adapted to fit the emerging evidence.
That's certainly how the prosecution presented it. Another example was the exact location of the attacks on his mother and sister. His account shifted on whether they were attacked inside the bedroom or out in the passageway, seemingly depending on which version better fit the blood spatter evidence being discussed at that point in the trial. It felt reactive.
It sounds like a narrative built on quicksand.
The defense was constantly trying to plug holes as the forensic evidence came pouring in. The foundation of his story seemed shaky and prone to convenient adjustments.
Now let's touch on the claim about the intruder's identity again. He specifically said they were black South Africans. How significant was that assertion in the context of the trial?
It's impossible to ignore the South African context here. The defense invoking the black intruder narrative. Well, it taps into real and pervasive fears about crime in the country. It's a known, though often criticized, tactic in some cases to deflect blame for domestic violence onto outsiders, playing on societal anxieties.
So it's a recognized pattern.
It is. The prosecution didn't necessarily attack the trope itself head-on, but they relentlessly contrasted it with the actual evidence. They argued, typical home invasions involve theft, often violence focused on subduing or sexual assault. None of that happened here. The weapon was the family's own axe. An intruder would likely bring their own tools or weapons. These specific facts made the random black intruder scenario seem highly unlikely in this specific case.
Okay, so with the narrative shifting and the intruder story looking weak, the defense needed something else to explain Henri's bizarre behavior, especially the calmness and the time gap.
Yeah.
That led them to the medical defense, right? The so-called laughing seizure defense.
Yes, that was their major attempt to provide a non-incriminating explanation for everything that seems suspicious about Henri's actions and recall.
Can you break that down? What exactly were they claiming medically?
They brought in experts who suggested Henri suffered from a condition called juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, or JME. It's a real type of epilepsy.
Yeah.
Their theory was that the extreme stress and trauma of the event triggered a seizure in Henri. And following a seizure, there's often a period called the post-ictal state.
Which is?
It's basically a period where the brain isn't functioning normally. It can cause confusion, drowsiness, memory problems, even unusual behavior. The defense argued this postictal state was responsible for Henri's calm, detached demeanor on the emergency call, his inability to remember clearly or act decisively, and crucially, the nearly 3-hour gap where he claimed to be unconscious or unaware.
So essentially, his brain short-circuited due to the trauma via an epileptic seizure, explaining away all the red flags.
That was the argument. It was a way to say he wasn't calm because he was guilty. He was calm because his brain wasn't working right after a seizure. And he didn't remember because of postictal amnesia.
It sounds plausible on the surface. Did the medical evidence actually back it up strongly?
Well, the prosecution's medical experts pushed back hard. They argued that amnesia related to seizures or concussions is typically global for the period, meaning you lose everything from that time frame. It's usually not selective.
But Henri's memory loss was selective.
Extremely selective, according to the prosecution. He could recall incredibly specific details when it suited his narrative, the attacker giggling, the knife getting stuck, throwing the axe. But when asked about difficult points, why didn't you help Rudy? Why didn't you warn your mother? What exactly happened during those 3 hours? Suddenly his memory became hazy, or he claimed complete amnesia for that specific moment.
So he remembered the bits that painted him as a victim or fighter, but not the bits that were hard to explain.
That's precisely the pattern the prosecution highlighted. It didn't look like genuine neurologically caused amnesia, which tends to be more like a complete blackout. It looked like someone choosing what to remember and what to forget.
Did any experts actually confirm he could have had a seizure?
Yes, one of the defense's own experts, a Dr. Butler, did testify that JME was a possibility for Henri. However, under cross-examination, he had to make a critical concession.
What was that?
He was asked directly, is it possible that Henri could have committed the murders, staged the crime scene, and then had a seizure afterwards, perhaps triggered by the stress of his own actions?
And what did Dr. Butler say?
He conceded that, yes, emphatically yes, that sequence was possible. So even if Henri did have epilepsy and did have a seizure, it didn't rule out his guilt. The seizure could have happened after he committed the crimes. It wasn't an alibi.
Wow. So the medical defense kind of collapsed under scrutiny, didn't provide the get-out-of-jail-free card they might have hoped for.
Not at all. It raised possibilities, but ultimately couldn't negate the mountain of other evidence pointing towards Henri.
Okay, let's shift to that physical evidence now, the forensics. This is where the science really started to speak volumes, wasn't it? Starting with the weapons themselves.
Absolutely. The weapons were undeniably linked to the family, not an intruder. Exhibit 1, the axe used in the murders. It belonged to Martin van Breda. It was kept in the pantry or scullery area.
Not something an intruder would likely know about or search for.
Highly unlikely. And Exhibit 2, the knife that caused Henri's injuries. As we said, it was a Victorinox knife, part of a set, taken directly from the kitchen knife block.
So the idea is an intruder comes in, somehow bypasses state-of-the-art security, brings no weapons, then conveniently finds the family axe and a specific kitchen knife to carry out the attacks and inflict superficial wounds on the survivor.
It strains credulity past the breaking point. It's just not how burglaries or home invasions typically unfold.
And then there's the blood. The blood spatter analysis seems like it was absolutely critical in dismantling Henri's story.
It was pivotal. Captain Marius Joubert, the state's bloodstain pattern expert, provided incredibly detailed testimony. His analysis focused on the tiny droplets of blood found on Henri's clothing.
Specifically, his sleeping shorts and socks, right?
Yes. And the patterns found there, particularly what's called cast-off spatter, tiny droplets, flung from a moving, bloodied object like the axe.
Okay.
Those patterns, combined with DNA analysis of the blood, placed Henri in close proximity to Martin, Teresa, and Rudy when the blows were being struck.
So, not hiding in the bathroom, not passed out on the stairs.
The blood spatter evidence directly contradicted both those claims. For instance, if he was just peeking from the bathroom while Rudy and Martin were attacked in the bedroom, it's hard to explain how blood spatter carrying their DNA landed on his shorts in the patterns observed.
And Teresa's blood. She was attacked mainly in the passage, wasn't she?
Primarily, yes. Yet her blood was also found on Henri's shorts. Captain Joubert argued that for her blood to travel from the passageway through the bedroom door and onto Henri, who claimed to be near the door or inside the room, it didn't fit the physics of blood spatter projection unless he was much closer to her during the attack.
So the blood literally traced his movement and presence during the violence.
In essence, yes. It created a scientific narrative of his location that was totally at odds with his verbal narrative. Joubert also noted details about Rudy's blood, how some of it had time to start clotting while he was on the bed and floor.
What does that imply?
It suggests Rudy wasn't moving much for a period. It contradicts the idea of a continuous, chaotic, fast-moving struggle. It implies pauses, periods where Rudy was stationary while bleeding. Again, it didn't fit Henri's description of a frantic fight.
Okay, the blood evidence sounds incredibly damning.
Yeah.
Now let's look at Henri's own injuries again. The neat cuts, the shallow stab wound. What did the forensic pathologist say about those?
Their assessment was quite blunt. Dr. Marianne Temensma and later Professor Johan Dempers, who reviewed the findings, both concluded the wounds were highly suspicious.
How so?
They pointed out the striking similarity between Henri's injuries and what they called textbook photographs of self-inflicted wounds.
Textbook examples. What makes them look self-inflicted?
Several things. The cuts on his left forearm, there were 4 of them, were parallel, superficial, and evenly spaced. Very neat. The 3 cuts on his chest were also superficial, mostly horizontal. And the stab wound in his side. It was only 10 millimeters deep, barely broke the skin and fatty tissue.
So not deep, ragged, defensive wounds you'd expect from fending off an axe or a knife attack.
Exactly. In a real fight, especially against someone wielding an axe, you'd expect deeper wounds, more jagged cuts, injuries perhaps to the hands and arms from trying to block blows. These looked controlled, hesitant, designed to mimic injury without causing real damage.
Like someone testing the blade almost.
That's one interpretation. They lacked the characteristics of wounds inflicted during a dynamic, forceful struggle where the victim is resisting.
And did the defense offer any expert medical testimony to counter this? To say, no, these could be defensive wounds.
That's a really crucial point. They didn't. The defense called no expert witnesses at all to refute the state's forensic pathology evidence regarding the self-inflicted nature of Henri's injuries.
That silence speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It was seen by the court as a significant failure to challenge damning evidence. If those wounds could plausibly have been defensive, you'd expect the defense to bring in their own expert to argue that point. They didn't.
Now, there was a slight complexity with some of the DNA evidence, wasn't there? Particularly distinguishing between the male family members.
Yes, that's important to clarify. Some of the DNA samples, particularly mixtures found on the axe handle and maybe in the shower, contain DNA from multiple family members, including Henri, Rudy, and possibly Martin.
And the lab had trouble separating them perfectly.
At that time, the Forensic Science Laboratory in South Africa was using a standard set of 9 genetic markers, or STR loci, for routine analysis. While generally reliable, analyzing complex mixtures with fewer loci can sometimes make it difficult to definitively distinguish between closely related individuals, like brothers or father and son, within that mixture.
So it wasn't like a smoking gun DNA match in every single sample.
Not in every mixed sample, no. The defense tried to use this limitation to cast doubt. However, the court looked at the totality of the evidence. While some DNA mixtures were complex, the overall pattern on Henri's DNA being present in key locations, combined with the blood spatter placing him at the scene of the attacks, the domestic weapons, the stage scene, the bizarre call, the self-inflicted wounds.
It created an overwhelming circumstantial case.
Exactly. It wasn't reliant on one single piece of DNA. It was the cumulative weight, the convergence of all these different threads of evidence pointing in only one direction.
So bringing all that together, the inconsistencies, the forensics, the behavioral red flags, what was the court's final conclusion? How did Judge Desai summarize it?
Judge Siraj Desai, in delivering his judgment, was unequivocal. He stated there was no credible, convincing evidence whatsoever that an intruder had managed to breach the Desalsa security that night.
None at all.
None that stood up to scrutiny. He went on to say that when you looked at the cumulative effect of all the evidence presented by the state, it led to only one single reasonable inference.
Which was?
His words were, "The result is inescapable." The inescapable conclusion was that Henri van Breda was responsible.
And the formal verdict, delivered in May 2018.
Henri was found guilty. Guilty on all charges.
Which were?
3 counts of murder for his father Martin, his mother Teresa, and his brother Rudy. 1 count of attempted murder for his sister Marley. And 1 count of defeating or obstructing the administration of justice for staging the crime scene and lying to the police.
A clean sweep for the prosecution and the sentence.
It reflected the brutality in the court's view of the crimes. He received 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder count, to run concurrently, plus additional time for the attempted murder and defeating justice charges.
Did the judge comment on the nature of the crime or Henri's attitude?
Yes, very strongly. Judge Desai described the murders as cold-blooded and noted the excessive and gratuitous violence involved. He specifically pointed out that Henri showed no remorse throughout the trial and had offered no explanation for why he committed such an horrific act against his own family.
No remorse, no explanation, just silence on the motive. That brings us to Marley, the sister who survived against all odds. What became of her?
Marley's story is perhaps the most tragic element of the aftermath. She survived, yes, after suffering incredibly severe head trauma, requiring multiple surgeries and extensive rehabilitation. She did eventually recover enough to return to school.
But the attack left a permanent scar, mentally.
A profound one. She suffers from retrograde amnesia. She has absolutely no memory of the attack itself, or even the hours leading up to it. The entire event is a complete blank for her.
So she can't provide any testimony, any insight into what happened that night.
None at all. She is effectively the silent witness. She was separated from Henri immediately after the incident and went to live with other relatives.
Does she accept the verdict against her brother?
Sources close to the family have indicated that yes, she accepts the court's finding of guilt. But because of the amnesia, it's not something she can consciously process or linger on, as one report put it. She's had to rebuild her life carrying the physical and psychological scars, but without the memory of who inflicted them.
Just unimaginable. And Henri, what's the latest on his situation?
As of the latest available information, around October 2025, he's serving his life sentences. He was apparently transferred to a correctional facility in Gauteng province.
Was there an incident involving him in prison?
Yes, there are reports confirming he was involved in an assault incident back in October 2021. Interestingly, though, records show his request for a transfer to a different facility actually predated that assault. So he's continuing to serve his time.
It's just staggering that even after this exhaustive trial, the conviction, we still don't have a clear confirmed motive. Why did he do it?
And that's the lingering, deeply disturbing question mark over the whole case. The prosecution explored possibilities, maybe arguments over allowance, maybe resentment, but nothing concrete was ever proven or even strongly suggested as the reason. Financial issues were looked into but didn't seem severe enough to trigger this.
So no obvious trigger.
No obvious rational trigger for annihilating your family. And that lack of a clear motive makes the violence feel almost random, gratuitous, which is terrifying in itself.
It leads back to that chilling description Henri himself gave of this supposed intruder.
Exactly. That the attackers seem to be having fun murdering people. Without a clear motive like money or revenge, some analysts and people involved in the case speculated about plain criminality, as one put it, or perhaps something deeper, like a psychopathic impulse where the violence itself was the point.
The idea that someone could commit such extreme violence against their own family, seemingly without reason, is that somehow more frightening than if there had been a clear motive?
I think for many people, yes. Because it suggests a capacity for darkness that defies our attempts to understand or explain it. If it's not about greed or rage or revenge, what is it? Is it just a fundamental breakdown of empathy? A void where human connection should be?
It leaves us with that haunting question the experts grappled with. Is this kind of act just plain criminality? A terrible but ultimately comprehensible human failing? Or does it point to something darker, something about the potential within the human psyche that we really fail to grasp?
And that's the question that echoes long after the courtroom falls silent. It forces us to confront the terrifying possibility that the most dangerous threats might not be the phantoms outside the walls, but the unseen pressures and impulses simmering within.
A truly disturbing thought to end on. Thank you for walking us through the complexities of this horrifying case.
It's one that certainly stays with you.
And for everyone listening, don't let this case just fade away. We really encourage you to share your thoughts. What do you think happened? What about the motive? Drop your ideas in the comments section on YouTube.
And please, subscribe to Whispers of Crime on YouTube. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, wherever you get your podcasts.
Turn on that notification bell, too, so you don't miss our next deep dive into the shadows of crime. Thank you for joining us.